It's a great feeling when you're on the way to the Philippines. A feeling I'd experienced 5 times prior to this one, but this time was different because I was moving there permanently as a brand new retired expat. It's something that I dreamed about for as long as I could remember. Well, at least the past 10 years from that very first trip when I fell in love with the country. I considered myself to know all the positives and the negatives of everything that happened in the Philippines. I had a few friends who had been there and done that. I took comfort from the fact I could learn from their mistakes. Now, however, I'm struggling to pick up the pieces of my broken life. That might sound drastic or overly dramatic, but it's exactly how I feel. I wouldn't want anybody to go through what I did, not even my worst enemy. And I respect all the guys who say what happened to them, even though we know people are going to say nasty things to us. We do it anyway in the hope it's going to help at least one person to not do the same things and make the same mistakes. Now, before I go any further, I would like to say there's only one person to blame for the unhappy ending in this story, and it's the guy typing this right now. This is my fault, and my fault alone, and I take full responsibility for that. When you get to the airport in Manila, after doing it a few times, you already know the ropes. And while you're excited to be there, you don't want to get too excited too soon, just in case the queue you'll find yourself in at immigration is a mile long. You have to be prepared for that. Yet on this time, the queue was quieter than I'd ever experienced it before, and I hoped that would be a good sign of things to come. I had to go to the place where I always stayed in Manila, just for memory's sake, and that's the Holiday Inn in Makati. For me, it's a great location, right in the thick of all the action, and for the price, it's a good hotel. That's where I was going to spend the next week, just getting used to this new retired life that I had now. I was 62, ready to settle down and enjoy life. Halfway through 2022, which I suppose means is just how amazing how fast things can come crashing down. But at the time, I had $380,000 in investments, at home, which I knew should be enough for me to live a retired life in the Philippines. You've got those essentials that you have to pay for, health insurance, so that does take a big hit out of your budget. Then you've got accommodation and anything else that you want to add on top. I knew that was an okay budget, so it wasn't really a concern. I was not thinking about trying to find someone. I wanted to remain single. You might meet someone from time to time, but the thought of getting into a serious relationship was the furthest thing from my mind. I'd seen the odd person leave the Philippines due to having been involved with a Filipina. I didn't want to be that guy. Over my previous times in the country, I'd been everywhere. Not everywhere, but a lot of places. Everyone goes to Manila. Usually that's where you're going to find yourself landing, especially after a long-haul flight. Then there's Angeles, about an hour north, which I liked in moderation. I think that's the best way to talk about Angeles City. A couple of days for a wild party and then I've had enough. Bohol was always my favourite island, and I'd seen a few guys build houses there. I think one of them is still there. The other 3, I have no idea what happened to them. So based on those 4 guys, 1/4 of a success rate, 25%, that could be a good indication. But I wasn't considering building a house in Bohol. Starting a life there, though, that sounded great. There were places I hadn't yet been in the Philippines, so as part of a treat to myself for finally being able to retire, I had a month where I planned to visit a few of the places I'd never been before. Not only to have a good time and see more of the country that I loved so much, but also to see if any of these places I actually liked more than Bohol, which would be great for my retirement. I guess you could say it was me doing that small tour that put me in the position that jeopardized my retirement. But that wasn't thinking anything like that when I flew from Manila down to Davao on Mindanao. I'd heard lots of things about Mindanao, some positives, and again some negatives, and some parts of the island were meant to be quite dangerous, but I wasn't going anywhere close to there. Mindanao didn't do much for me. I had a good time across the 2 days I spent there, but it wasn't somewhere I ever thought I would return. Nothing really wrong with it. They were just places that I preferred a lot more, so I didn't see much point spending more than a few days there. Next, I went to Dumaguete. Never made it there before, and that gave me more of the feelings I was looking for. Again, I spent a few days there, looking around and taking in the sights and sounds. I liked it, but I did prefer Bohol and Cebu. After spending a little bit of time there, I decided to just stop the tour. I obviously knew where I liked the most, so there was no point going and looking anymore, really. Initially, I went back to Manila. Part of me wished I was going to be living there, but I thought that my budget would stretch a lot further on one of the islands. The only real negative I found, and I didn't like, was that when you're in Manila and you want to go to Bohol, you can't just get on a bus or a train for a 3 or 4 hours ride and get there. You've got to fly, and that's one of the things about the Philippines that is quite difficult for me. With it being an island nation, there's an awful lot of flying involved to get to different places, but that's just how it is. But it didn't mean it was my favourite part. I spent about a week in Manila. I did look at a few available rentals just to see what there was. I was as close to 100% sure that I wouldn't be living in Manila and I would live in Bohol, but I thought it would be good to look at what places there were available on the ground. I spent lots of time, like everyone does, looking at real estate websites of just what's available, but to see in person what you were getting, that was good. BGC had some amazing places you could live. A small place I could probably fit within my budget, but everything that was more typical to what people at home were used to living in terms of sizes, the prices start to go up considerably. It was tempting, though, to live in BGC. If I did that, it might have been a better idea, but you can never go back and change things. I did go to Cebu before I went to Bohol, but after a week there, I did get the ferry to my favourite place. I don't know what it is about certain places that attract certain people. I don't know why I liked that place so much, but as soon as I got there, I immediately felt like I was home. I love the coastal road that goes around a bit of the island, yet it still feels like it's a long way for it to go to the next level of improvement that we see on Cebu, for example. I was thinking 5 or 10 years we're going to see a lot of development here, and that would just be at the right time for my retirement to be able to experience this. That excited me. You don't have to go too far out of Tagbilaran city, maybe 3 or 4 miles, and you've got amazing houses right next to the ocean. By amazing, it's not like a modern luxury house you would find in a similar location in the US. Here, normal people seem to live in these beautiful locations, great conditions right overlooking the ocean, and it was something like that I was hoping to rent. But when I got there, I wasn't going to just look for somewhere to rent straight away. I wanted to kick back and enjoy the retired life before putting down some firmer roots. Part of me was glad that I went to look at a few different places, just so I knew that I was making the right decision by basing myself in Bohol. I spent a week in my favourite beach resort to the northeast of the island. I think that's as much detail as I want to give. It wasn't a 5-star luxury resort. It was more like how I felt things would have been a long time ago, and I was just the sort of guy where I came from in the US that was rural, and that's where I felt most comfortable. In a similar setting, and that was almost perfect. A great week, just relaxing and planning and dreaming about what the next years would bring. You can't beat much about the Philippines. I mean the ocean and the beaches and the opportunities to just soak in nature in an environment that is not full of many tourists. Yet the beaches and oceans that you're experiencing are far better than the vast majority of places that most tourists go. In certain parts of the Philippines, you really do feel like you're discovering something that not many people have discovered. I get it, there are guys living in Bohol at the moment who are probably thinking that I'm talking nonsense. But if you really think and dig down into it, it's just how it felt for me. Bohol was the perfect location for someone seeking a retirement in paradise, yet without all the trappings of modernity and luxury living to go along with it. But if you'd wanted that, you could have it. What I'm trying to say is, I loved the state of development in Bohol, yet I could see, over time, things could only improve and get better and better. After spending that great week not doing much of anything, I moved to a hotel in the city. To call it a city is a bit inaccurate because it's only small, especially when you compare it to Cebu City, for example. It is more intimate and peaceful, I find. I'm not trying to advise anyone to go and visit themselves. I'm just giving you my own feelings, and I really loved it, and I think that's apparent. I took the hotel day by day and kept going, looking for somewhere perfect to rent. In an ideal world, I would have wanted beach views, a small yard, and that was it really. Didn't want much more than that. But I didn't want to pay more than $400 a month. You have to always bear in mind, at least in my case, that my insurance premiums were very high. That was the most expensive thing I paid for. If I did it like some guys and don't bother with insurance, I could have had a house a lot better, but that's not something I would ever have considered doing. Eventually, I found a place to rent. It was perfect. The only thing I needed to do was buy a car so I could get there easily, because it wasn't easy to get there via public transportation. I mean, they had buses occasionally, but at 62, retired, I wanted the nice life. I didn't want to do anything like that, so I bought myself a small car. I didn't spend a lot on it, but I did have to withdraw about $10,000 from my investments. Just a drop in the ocean. Shouldn't cause much difference, I thought. The place I rented was actually on part of the island that I never usually spent much time in. It was quite off the beaten track and not on the tourist path. The house was quite basic, but I was allowed to add some things to it to make it more like home. I spent a few $1,000s doing that, put in a cheap but nice bathroom and a small kitchen, but I thought I'm going to be living there for a very long time, so if I spend $3,000, which is how much I spend, across the course of 3 years, that's an extra $100 a month. So that was my reasoning behind it. Don't get me wrong, you can find good places to rent in the Philippines that have everything you already want installed. But at least from my experience, not only are they a lot more expensive, they might not be in the exact area you want them to be. You might be in a community with similar houses, or you might be in a condominium building. If you want an actual house out of the way of things, then I couldn't find any houses anywhere close to my budget with the conditions that I actually wanted. So it was a bit of a compromise that I had to spend that money. I do think it's important that I point that out, just to say why I chose the place I did. Moving in, though, was great. I wasn't expecting it to be the last place I lived, but I expected to be there for a good 3, 4, or even 5 years. So far, my retirement is moving exactly in the direction I wanted it to go down. I was never someone who spent a lot of time speaking to other expats, although from time to time, there was a certain restaurant that you might go to that served your type of food. You'd go there and you'd have a bit of a gossip with some of the people who lived there as well, but most of the time I just kept myself to myself. I love the little shops you get in the Philippines, the ones that are 100% local, where you could go and get a couple of beers and a bag of ice and go and sit on the beach. You needed to find a tree to sit under because, some of the beaches there was nothing there, so the sun is quite strong. But the peace, the tranquility of being in your favourite part of the world and nobody else is there, nobody else understands just how good it is. That's what I liked. But it was when I was on a beach with a few bottles of Red Horse. Unfortunately this time, they didn't have any ice in the shop and the fridge wasn't working, so they were quite warm, but that was a compromise that I had to accept on quite a lot of my previous vacations. I did learn when I was living there to buy everything and keep everything in the refrigerator at home and make my own ice, and that tended to work for me, but that day I did go to the shop. I want to describe it in a way so that you can picture it, but you don't know which beach it was. How do I say that? Let's just say it was not a very popular beach, and it wasn't as beautiful as some of the other beaches. It was just one of those local area sort of deals that you get in the Philippines at a place like that. But I'm sitting down and I'm reading, and I can't remember what book it was, and I've tried to think for a while and I can't remember, but that doesn't really matter. All of a sudden, though, I hear a "Hi, how are you?" I look up and a Filipina girl is saying hi to me. I say hey back, "How are you too? I'm great." The usual things you say when you're speaking to someone. As I've already mentioned, I was 62 at the time, but I didn't look like I was 62. I bet I could have passed for at least 5 or 6 years younger. I still had a full head of hair, I wasn't overweight, and I tried to keep myself as healthy as I could. She introduced herself to me, she asked me what I was doing, I lifted up my book and just said I'm reading, with a few beers, enjoying my retirement. What are you doing? She just talked about how she was going for a walk, but she lived very close by. She pointed in the direction where you could see a few houses and she said, "That's where I live." She then looked at my book and said, "Oh, I've read that before." Wish I knew which book it was, but I don't know whether she actually did or she was just trying to make conversation. But I said to her, "It's great." And there's a long silence and I'm not saying anything, and I think she's thinking of something to say. I think she saw I only had a small amount of my last beer left. I only took 2 small bottles of Red Horse, so it's not like she called me at the most opportune moment, but she said, "You fancy another one? I know a great little place not far away." I thought she was being kind and nice. I didn't have anything better to do, so that sounded like a good idea to me. Let's make a friend. I was going to be here for a long time after all. So we walk in the direction she signalled, and I pointed out my car parked not far away. The place I was living was 25-minute drive away, and I sort of said to her, "I've got my car so I can only have one more." And she laughed and said, "You're in the Philippines, don't worry about it." You'll hear that all the time in the Philippines. They've got a lot more relaxed attitude to drinking and driving, and as much as I know I could have done that, I was never the sort of person who would ever dream of doing that, even if I knew I could get away with it. I wasn't about to get drunk and get behind the wheel of my car, at least now. I said I'll have one, I'm not going to drink and drive, just smiling, and she laughs at me and says, "I know you're not from the Philippines if you do like that." "If I did that, would I look like a Filipino?" I jokingly said to her. "You know what I mean," she said, and then we just continued walking. I didn't say anything until we got to this little place. I wouldn't call it a bar, it was more of a small shop like the one I mentioned before, with a few tables outside it. There was some guy sitting on one of the tables, so friendly people in the Philippines, and they say hi, and I just sit down and get into a conversation with this lady I'd just met. I found out she was 45 years old. She didn't look anywhere close to 45. I always felt if you saw a Filipina, if she took care of herself and didn't eat all the oily food and all the processed food that many of them do, they do seem to age quite well. Yet you do occasionally see Filipinas who will look a lot older than they are. You can see that that's the type of thing they eat, really heavy old cooking oil and bad quality processed meats. I tried to avoid that, and it seemed she did as well. The fact that she was 45 may put many guys off, but it was because she was 45 that I thought I was safe from anything nefarious that could happen at some point in the future. Not that I was thinking anything would happen at all. It was just nice to have a conversation with a local. I was asking her questions about what was it like to come from there. What's it like going to school at a place like this? What's it like being so close to the ocean? Beautiful beaches. I wanted to know all about it. I'd chosen to move there because I loved it so much, yet C was from there, and that fascinated me. She was called Nicole, and I was enjoying getting to know her. I didn't know why she said hi to me. Maybe she was just being nice. Maybe she saw me there a few times and wanted to see what I was doing. But whatever it was good to see her. I had a beer, and I was about to leave back to the car, and she said, "No, have another one." And she passed me a Red Horse, and against my better judgment, I had another one, and then another one as well, and then 2 or 3 after that. I was really enjoying being in her company, but I wasn't in a fit state to drive home anymore. She was laughing at me saying, "No problem, you can drive. I'll drive you if you want." I don't know why I said okay. She had a few drinks as well, but I had a few before, I suppose, but I thought, yeah, go on, you can drive me home. So we walk to my car, I jump into the passenger seat, and she's behind the wheel. I never thought to ask if she had a license or if she had ever driven a car before, but if I had to guess, I would say she didn't have a license and maybe had never driven a car, maybe once or twice. But luckily the roads were quite quiet. I love the roads throughout Bohol. Little narrow roads, palm trees and jungles on either side, and then you see little houses like dotted around. It's really, really beautiful, just my type of place. And we're joking with each other when she's driving the car because she's going maybe 15 miles an hour. And we finally get to my house. I just get out of the car. I was about to walk around to the other side because the window was open. I should mention that the air conditioning in the car wasn't working, but I didn't mind. It actually made me feel a big connection to where we were because I was driving around with the window open. But I'm walking around to the other side of the car about to say goodbye in the window, and she gets out. "Got any beers in the fridge?" she asked me. That wasn't something I was expecting, but it just so happened that I did. And I said, "Would you like to have a beer?" "I would," she said. And she sits on the chair next to the little table in the yard. As I said, the house I rented was just what I was looking for, not too close to any other houses. Quite laid-back setting off the main track. Very peaceful. Unfortunately, I didn't have sea views, but the sea wasn't too far away. But you could go to the sea, although it wasn't as beautiful as some of the other beaches on the island. But it was nice to go and sit there occasionally, which I did. So I walk inside, and the first thing you find out is the power's off. You just hoped it hasn't been off for long. You open the refrigerator, and the beers are still reasonably cool. Not as cold as you'd like them, but power cuts were just one of the things I had to get used to, especially at the place I was renting. But it added to the excitement of it, I found. So I take 2 beers and open them and go and sit next to her outside, and we just start talking. That was when she told me that she'd seen me on the beach quite a few times before, and she'd always wondered what I was doing. She said I looked really interesting and she wanted to speak to me and see if she could get to know me. Then she told me she used to be in a relationship with a guy from America, and he was living with her in Manila actually. She thought that they were serious. They lived together for a few years, and one day he just left. After she told me that, she said before she was with him, she was married to a Filipino a long time ago and had 2 kids. Both the kids are now grown, and her ex-husband unfortunately passed away. You won't believe how, but that was in a road accident. I didn't ask if he was drunk when he had the crash. We finished a beer each, and I go back to the refrigerator and get another each. And she's just so incredibly easy to talk to. She talked about her kids. Both of them were living in Manila. Apparently they'd been to university and were working okay jobs. Nothing amazing, but they were working to a level that they could at least live a reasonable life, which many people couldn't. Then she starts talking about how she was lonely. She just lived in her house by herself. Part of me is having a really good time, but it wasn't ever my idea to meet someone or have a partner. I wanted to stay by myself. I thought that would be the best thing for me to do. But I was prepared to see where things went with Nicole. I couldn't see anything about her that would indicate she had any bad intentions. I just thought she was a nice person who had seen me on the beach a few times and came to say hi. The fact that we got on well with each other, that was a bonus. We finished the second beer, and then we had another one, and the nearest shop was about 10 minutes away, and after the beers ran out, I will admit to getting behind the wheel of the car and going to the shop to get some more beers. I promised myself I wouldn't, but I did, and I'll admit that I did. Luckily, the power wasn't off in the shop, so the beers were really nice and cold. You always have to cherish a cold beer in certain parts of the Philippines, because you can't always guarantee that you're going to find one at the right temperature. If you're sitting in a bar in Makati and you're hearing this, then you might not be able to understand. Try going to one of the islands and then out of the main area, and then you'll understand just how important cold beer is. I drive back to the house, and on the way back I'm thinking, I just left the house with all my things in it with her there. So I drove a bit faster to get back, but she was still there, sat outside. I don't know what to make of anything, but I want to take advantage of any opportunity that comes my way. And just because I had this chance encounter, I didn't think anything could go wrong. Things go wrong very quickly though if you're not careful. We had some more beers, a few each, and it's approaching mid-evening and the sun's starting to set, and she looks up and thinks, I better go home now. At that point, I wasn't in a suitable state to drive, and she definitely wasn't, and then she just starts laughing and says, would it be okay if I stayed here for the night? I'll go back home tomorrow. By all means, I said. I only had 1 bedroom, but I had a sofa, so you can sleep on that. We continued talking about my life, what I used to do, about her life and what she used to do, and I'm reassuring myself that she's 45 years old. It's not like she's 25 years old. The typical age, I suppose, you hear happening in all the stories, all the horror stories. I just felt I was lucky meeting this lady. She was great. A few more drinks later and a lot of talking later, and I'm starting to get tired, and looks like she is, so we go into the house. I get her to some blankets and she starts lying on the sofa and I go to bed. A few hours later, she wakes me up, and you probably know what that means. And then in the morning, I'm really struggling to understand just what happened. You don't just meet people, go and say hi, go for a drink, and then spend the night with them, but obviously you do, or she did. It was quite an awkward conversation in the morning. We start just joking and laughing with each other, and she said, can you drive me home now? So we go into the car, and I drive back to her house and pull up outside, and she says, would you like to come in and have a look? I'd love to show you around. So we went inside, and she showed me around her house. That's the beauty of being retired, though. You can just do what you want when you want to do it. Not like I had to be anywhere or do anything, so I always wanted to take advantage of opportunities that came my way. Her house also wasn't too close to other houses in the area, but you could see the beach from her house. When I've talked to my friends about this, now I'm not there anymore, they always sort of say she must have been dripping in money if she's got a house on the beach. But I don't think many people can understand that in the Philippines, they've got so many islands, so many beaches, that it's not a very special thing. But she could see from her house to the beach and to the tree where I was sitting before. I hadn't asked her what she did for work yet. I told her I was retired, and she offered me a glass of water and we sat down. I wasn't ready for another beer yet, but I asked her, what do you do for work? She just said at the moment she wasn't working, but her kids sent her a bit of money, and that was enough for her. She said that the house she was living in, apart from her time in Manila, was always her family home. She then talked about how her parents unfortunately had passed away, her 2 siblings had left the island for a better life somewhere else, so she was left with the house. She did upgrade it into its current state, but that was a long time ago. It always made me think, people leaving such a beautiful location in search of a better life. It makes you think that I was there for a better life myself, yet the locals wanted to escape there for something else. When you think about it that way, it makes you understand the different situations people are in around the world. I was interested to know what she did all day. She just said not much. She talked about how she liked to read, which is what I like to do as well. She would like to go on walks, but only in the evenings when the sun had already started to go down. She said she didn't really like swimming very much, which I thought was quite funny, being in a location with some of the most clear seas in the world. But you would go and meet up with friends and just gossip for a few hours, just to kill the time, she said. But it was quite a unique situation, being that all her close family weren't there anymore. She did say that she had cousins that lived in the vicinity, but not too close by. I thought that was quite a strange situation in the Philippines. I've heard of instances where you go to a place where someone's from and there are hundreds of family members around, so this felt quite unique. But after sitting there for an hour just chatting, I told her I better go, and she grabbed my phone and put her number in it and said, "Call me now." So I did, and then she had my number. I can remember driving back home thinking what a strange experience that was, but what a wonderful experience it was as well. Deep down, the idea of having a partner was something that I longed for, but I felt like it was too big of a risk, so that's why I wasn't interested. But what could go wrong with a relationship like this? I'm thinking like this and I'm not even in a relationship with her, and I don't know if I'm ever going to see her again. The thoughts that run through your mind, I guess you can only call them funny. I get back home and just do some reading, and it was probably 5 or 6 p.m, and then my phone starts ringing, and it's Nicole. "It was so nice meeting you," she said. "How are you? What are you doing at the moment?" When I tell her and ask her what she's doing, she just said I'm about to go and meet up with some friends, and then just go back to the house, have a bit of a chat. That's what people tended to do there. But after, I've got nothing else to do, so if you want to come around, bring a few more drinks with you, you're more than welcome. I wanted to go and see her again, of course I did, but part of me didn't want to because I didn't want to ruin what I had. But the opportunity was too good to be missed, so I said, "I'll be there in 2 hours." She said, "Make it 3. That would be about 10 p.m. I said, "Okay, got nothing else to do, see you then." I finished the book I was reading, went to the shop, bought some more Red Horse, and drove to her house. I want you to picture her house. It's not like some of the houses in the Philippines that are basic shacks made out of tin and scraps of wood. This was a proper structure. It wasn't an amazing house, but it was slightly above many of the houses that you see in villages around. When I get there, she hears the car pulling up and runs outside and, "Let me help you with those," she says, and she puts them in the fridge. Then she starts giving me a hug. It was at that moment that I just said to myself, just go with it. If it goes somewhere good, if it doesn't, never mind, take it as it comes. So I loosened up a lot and we just spoke for hours and hours and she invited me to stay over, which I did. One negative was there was no air conditioning in that house and I did prefer AC, but I was getting used to sleeping without AC when the power kept going off. From then on, we never really spent time apart. I mean, we did, but only a few hours. I was at her house or she was at mine, and we just ended up together. This was before the end of 2022, and things were moving really quickly and unexpectedly. We never seemed to have arguments, we never seemed to have problems with each other. It was just like we were two people living in that part of the Philippines, spending a lot of time alone, and we just found each other. That's how it felt, and before long, we were talking about moving in and living somewhere permanently together. After a lot of careful thought, we decided that I would move into her house. I would have to write off everything I'd spent on the other house, but that's just one of those things. $3,000. Never mind, it is what it is. But I moved into her house, and when I did move in, I'm really thinking that this is actually happening. I know so many guys go to the Philippines because their main hope is to meet someone. That wasn't even part of my idea behind moving to the Philippines. It kind of just happened, and here I am, living in Nicole's house. I fell for Nicole, and it made me feel like I was in my 20s again. She was everything that I'd ever wanted in a partner, yet everything that I thought I would never be able to find. But it was happening, and we seemed to go great together. After a month, I was starting to struggle without air conditioning, and without all the things that I really wanted to use living long term. So, I had to put some more money into her house. I bought 2 AC units, one for the bedroom and one for the main room. I spent a bit on a kitchen, as I did on the last place, and also a bathroom. Mainly a renovation, but I had to spend $6,000 doing that, which had to come out of my investments. But it didn't feel like a lot to be able to live there comfortably. The problem now is I'm feeling like I can't live without her, and the thought of living without her would ruin my time in the Philippines. Exactly the feelings I was trying so hard to avoid. Then my car completely died. Went to try and get it fixed and spent about $1,000 on it. Quite a few spare parts were needed, and it was never right again. Could never get the AC working, and it got to the point where I just had to get rid of it. I don't have to buy another one, so it was a bit of annoyance. But I still had enough money coming in to live, even though most of it was going for my insurance payments. But I was in the Philippines for a quiet, easy life. But my life wasn't really quiet and easy anymore, because I now had someone that I was living with that I had to please. We had to do things together because we were in a relationship, and that's what you do. I never told Nicole my financial situation, yet. I just told her I was retired and I had a small income to live on, and that's all I said. I didn't say, I've got X amount of this or X amount of that, and she never asked. She wasn't trying to find out anything about my financial situation. It just seemed like she wanted company, and she was getting company from me. I lived this life for 6 months, and I'm really happy, and retirement's great, and I'm just getting in enough money to be able to continue living like this. Maybe we could save a little bit for 3 months and go on a trip somewhere. And I saved over 6 months, enough to go somewhere. And I asked if she'd like to go to Manila for a week with me. Of course she would, she said. So we went to Manila and stayed in the very same hotel I stayed in Makati that I always loved. It was great getting to see a different part of the Philippines with her. Kind of made things real, not just connected to that little part of Bohol where she was from. When we were in Manila, she said she wanted to go and meet up with her kids because she hadn't seen them for a long time. That was great. I was happy to do that. So, we went to see them. She said they were earning a salary that for the Philippines was quite good. For people like her, she said. I didn't like it when she said people like her, as though other people were different in some way. I never saw it like that. But we met her eldest at his place. That wasn't much to write home about, a very small room he was renting, just saying he was saving up because he wanted to buy himself a condo soon, and he wanted the deposit for it. Her youngest, her daughter, she came to meet us there, and I took them all out for a nice meal. The kids, they were great. Then they left, we went back to the hotel, and went for a drink in a bar not far away. I think I was at the peak of my happiness, because everything seemed to be perfect. We left Manila, back to Bohol, back to the house, and back to that life that I loved so much. I might have only been back for about 2 or 3 weeks, and she's speaking on the phone with one of her kids, I think her son, and when she puts the phone down, she's got a bit of a serious look on her face, but I wasn't ready for what she said next. Do you know my son? He's hoping to buy a condo and he needs a deposit to be able to buy it. He's managed to save up over the past 3 years about 100,000 pesos, so he needs another 200,000, and he can't get it on his own. He wants his own place and he's saving and saving, and he's never going to get there. Then she said, I really wish I had the money to give it to him. I feel so bad I can't help my son. I don't for the life of me know why I said to her, don't worry about it. I'll give you the money for the deposit. The words sort of came out of my mouth without me even understanding that it was happening. And before I could say, I'll have to move some things around and maybe sell something, it might take 6 months, which I wanted to say after I realized what I said, she just smiled incredibly wide and said, thank you so much. He will be so happy. Damn. I'd committed to it. I don't know why. I just said it. I don't know why I did. I didn't mean to. It was as if it was an instinctive reaction to try to make her feel better without understanding what the consequences of that would be. It wasn't a fortune. $3,000. Just under. But it was $3,000 that I didn't have to give to her. But I tried to forget about it and I'd already committed to it. What could I do? Be careful next time. Don't do it again. But then her daughter gets upset because she wants to get her place. She's been saving for a long time as well. She's only got 30,000 pesos. And I had no choice but to do the same for her daughter as well. All in about $5,000. Just like that. Gone. Bear in mind, I had just enough invested for me to rent somewhere, pay for my insurance, and have a peaceful existence. And I've already spent money on the old house that I had to write off, her house, and now I've spent another $5,000, plus the problem with the car, and the fact that I would probably need to get another one, even though I had tried to convince myself I didn't need one. So that's probably going to be at least another $5,000. All that added up to about 10% of my investments. So not a big percentage, but it was still an amount that reduced my income by 10%. I tried to forget about all those as being one-off expenses. She didn't ask me to give the money for her son. I offered it. It didn't appear that she had any indication that she expected me to do that, but I just offered it, so it was my own fault. But I promised myself I wouldn't do it again. At this point, we're in 2023. Had a great new year with her. Just me and her sat on the beach by ourselves, listening to the ocean. It was amazing, and the longer I stayed with her, the more in love with her I became. Around February time, I'd forgotten about those little money problems that had happened, and I'm just enjoying myself with her. But by this time, I had already bought another car, because without it, it's no fun. Days were everything I thought they would be in retirement. I wasn't able to spend a lot of money. I couldn't go to restaurants often, but that's not what I was wanting to do. I was happy to be in this perfect location with Nicole. But I did find now I was fully supporting her financially. When I said I hadn't done anything else stupid since, a month or so ago from this point, I told her kids not to send money to their mom anymore. It was only $100 from each of them, but that was still $200. I just said, don't worry about it, I'll look after her now. And then as soon as I said that, I'm thinking, as much as I wanted to do that because I loved her, I can't really afford to do that, so I got to the point where I'm still able to live on the money that's coming in, but it is a very big struggle. March 2023. The worst month of my life. My investments plummeted in value by about 22%. I should have held on. I'd have been fine if I did, but I panic sold. I was never an investor. I'd just taken advice from a financial advisor, and I happened to be heavily invested in things weighted towards banking stocks. But with all those failures, and then all of a sudden, your investments go down by 22%. You've got to picture it like this. I had $380,000. By the time I'd done quite a few silly things I shouldn't have done, I was probably down to $340,000. I'd held these investments since retirement, and while they went up a bit and down a bit, they were around break even. But I was under the impression this was meant to be a stable situation, so I'd spent $40,000 out of it. And then over the course of a few days, $340,000 all of a sudden becomes something around $260,000. And I will admit, I did panic sell. I sold everything. I'd never been in a situation like that in my life, so getting rid of all the investments and having the cash in the bank. That sent me into a depression. Nicole could tell something was wrong, and I had to tell her about my investments and how much I had, how they went down in value, and now my income might not be enough for me to live in the Philippines. Nicole was very supportive, telling me not to worry about it, saying we have each other, we'll be fine. You don't have to pay rent here, she said. It's not that expensive to live here. Just don't worry about it, we'll be fine. But it's different when you're a foreigner, isn't it? I had to make sure my visa was always in place. That meant going on trips when necessary to do that. That was an expense that I had that she didn't. Health insurance, that was very important. That was an expense I had and she didn't have, but maybe she should have, but it wouldn't have been as expensive for her. These were non-negotiable things that I needed to pay for. But she was really supportive of me. She always was. It took me a few weeks to try to convince myself, you've still got $260,000, you're 63 years old, going on 64. Am I really going to live 260 months more if I spend $1,000 a month? Am I going to get to 84? But I didn't like how uncertain things were. Things only got worse. And I honestly believe that Nicole only had mine and her best intentions at heart when she said, "Why don't we try and open a business?" Initially, I was dead set against the idea. But she said, "We don't need to use all the money, but we could open a small business, maybe a shop and a little bar on the beach, something like that. If we only make an extra $200 or $300 a month, that's going to go a long way." But no, initially I didn't like the idea. But a month later, I found myself transferring in $80,000. We bought a small plot of land, built a bar on it with a little shop. It was only local, stocked it out, and I actually bought a bike as well, and a few improvements on the house that were essential that needed doing. But we now had this little business, all set up a few months later. We had someone who was working for us there, and I will agree it was making money. Maybe $20 or $30 a month, maybe, after you take into consideration the person we had to pay, the bills, when the electric was working. So, yeah, that wasn't a sensible thing to do. The biggest problem was, that I was now in love with Nicole, and I didn't want to not be with her. So that's what made it worse. What would have happened if I never met her? I don't know. But I asked her if we could get married because I wanted to have that connection with her, and she was really happy and agreed to. So a month later, after spending more money, jumping through all the hoops necessary to get married, we got married. And as much as I was happy about that, I still had these awful feelings like, why did I sell those investments? Why did we build that shop? Why did we do this? Why did I do everything? But again, I just tried to convince myself it's going to be fine. I probably had $170,000 left. It's difficult to come to terms with that, yet still I tried to convince myself, don't do anything else, don't do anything else, you've got 170 months at $1,000 a month, so just relax, get married to her, she's obviously a real person who loves you. I wasn't doubting that, I wasn't thinking she was ever trying to scam me or do something like that, but in 170 months' time, I don't have any money left. I'm going to be close to 80, so she's probably going to look after me, even if it means I'm going to be in a very bad condition. So that made me miserable, and I was starting to get upset, and Nicole could tell. You then start to think, what are the options? I can't get a job, especially in the Philippines. I could go back home and try to get a job, but what about Nicole? Could I take Nicole with me back to America? And throughout all this time, Nicole is just telling me not to worry about it. And then we start having little arguments because I'm worrying about it, and her mentality was just so different to mine. She's saying, I've got nothing and I'm okay. You've got that money in the bank. If you spend $1,000 a month for the next 5 years, you're still going to have more than $100,000. And you're going to have more because during those 5 years, you would have been receiving interest on that money. I could get 4%, I think, at the time on the money, but it wouldn't be enough to live on without the money going down. But the money wouldn't go down as quick. My mentality, though, was just, I felt uncomfortable if my money would continue to go down, even though the years of my life were also going down as well, which is obvious for everyone. But people are like they are. I tried to think like she thought and just get on with life, and over the next few months, I was slowly coming to terms with this new reality. And it really wasn't that bad if you think about it. But at the time, as much as I was trying to be okay with it, I wasn't. I was feeling so bad, and I wanted to feel better. My only idea of what to do would be to go away for a while with Nicole, somewhere different, and try to take stock on things. And in that case, for some reason, you don't mind spending $5,000 for a month in a really nice resort, thinking you're getting your head straight, only to return back to Bohol and be in a worse position than before. Why do we do these things to ourselves? I'll never know, but over the next 6 months, my extreme fear of my financial situation drove me and Nicole apart. I think that's why my story is different, because if I look back now, I blame myself for what happened. I was being really argumentative, always complaining about things, every time I had to use money for anything, because I knew I wasn't getting more money in. I was getting interest, but it wasn't enough to cover anything that needed covering. We were in a really big argument, and I did something that I have never done before, and I will never do again, and I regret more than anything. But I hit her, and she fell over and stood up, really upset with a bleeding lip. "What's wrong with you?" she said. That was the lowest I'd ever been. I hated myself because of that, and it was my own financial stupidity that caused it, not her. And that's the thing how I think my story is different, because I drove us apart. When if I had been sensible, I could have lasted until I was over 80. And I know she was the type of person who would have looked after me. She would have done. But whatever it was about me, whether I was stubborn or what it was, I turned into this monster that I didn't recognize anymore. I couldn't believe I did that. I told her how sorry I was, and when she'd calmed down and I'd calmed down, I was just thinking about how uncomfortable I was because of the situation I was in. I wish I'd listened to her and not worried about it, but it wasn't in my nature to do that. I told her I'm sorry, but I can't stay here anymore. I need to go back home and fix things. I gave her a little bit of money, and now she was upset. But she was really upset. But I had to go, and I did. She didn't want me to go. I could tell she didn't, and I didn't want to go. But I did. I just flew home. I rented a place, I got another job, and I regret coming back because I probably could have made it work if I was brave enough. I miss Nicole every day, but I haven't tried to call her. She doesn't know my number here. I know hers, but I'm too worried to call her. We are still married. But I thought I knew what I was doing when I went there. But it just goes to show retirement in paradise isn't for everyone. As much as I thought I knew what I was doing and thought I was being careful, I wasn't prepared for the visceral reality of living somewhere like that, while my money was going down with nothing to top it up. Did I do some stupid things? Yes, like building that little bar and shop and buying the land. Part of me is glad I did because I gave it to her and that's something that she's got. Because she didn't really do anything wrong to me. It was me who did that to her. And I wanted to share my story just to say it's not always the fault of the Filipina for the decline of a relationship. I blame myself 100%, and I can't believe I had a great girl, and I broke up with her. Friends tell me I did the right thing. We've heard so many stories, and there are going to be so many more cases of guys going there and losing everything. And it was because I was so paranoid about not losing everything that I lost her instead. But then again, I have to take solace from the fact that if all my money did run out, maybe she would have changed, because we've heard it time and time again. When the money runs out, the girl changes and it's not the same anymore. So it was either I break it off now and try to build up my money again a little bit, or she breaks it off with me when the money runs out. You can't win, can you? And that's what I want to say at the end. Whatever you do, you can't win. If you're in the Philippines like I was, number one, make sure you have enough income so you don't have to watch your money go down. If you do meet someone and start a relationship, be open and honest about what your position is. Let her know things you're prepared to do and things you're not prepared to do, and it's a non-negotiable. And make sure you find someone who is reasonably close to your age and maturity. I think that's the main thing. But I failed, and I still think about Nicole every single day, hoping to one day see her again.